All right, so when you were attending Southern, did you all travel? Was that at the time you all were traveling to different schools to play, or did everyone come to Southern?
Oh, yes. It was very exciting. Uh, Permit me to tell you about two big trips in our lives at Southern. They were life-changing for me. Actually, the one that we went to Florida A&M. One year we went en route to Florida A&M, and actually east of New Orleans, because Baton Rouge is northwest of New Orleans, and the train had to go through New Orleans. So east of New Orleans and due east, approximately, I'm going to say 50 miles due east. There was a derailment in front of us, and it caused our train to have to go into reverse to come back to New Orleans. And the train company was responsible and liable for our getting to Florida A&M for our game. And they brought us back to New Orleans, and we flew.
Oh, wow.
That was the first time I flew. It was a propeller plane, and I remember some of the guys afraid to fly, and so they had to stay.
Oh,
But we made it to Florida A&M the next morning in sunshine. We got there quicker, and I've been flying ever since.
How big was the band?
We had approximately 120, 120 people, 128,
That's a
something
good
like that.
size.
Yeah, I'm a trombonist, so we had 22 trombones. Let me count for you. 22 trombones, 11 on the front and 11 on the back. So what is it? 11 times 13 is what? 143, something like that.
Somewhere around there.
Let's see,
My
10
math
times
is
13 is
horrible.
130, and then 11 more, 141. So it was 141, and then there were two drum majors, so there were 143 of us.
It's a good piece band.
Yeah.
So what made you feel the desire to want to major in music?
That's what I did. My mother was a singer. All my life, went to church with my mom, obviously, with my family, and she was a phenomenal singer. So when I went to elementary school, we had something that you guys don't know today called May Day. Have you heard of May Day?
My grandmother said
She's talking about May Day? Yeah, May Day is exciting. And as a kid, we would have these, our school would have the various combos, we call them today, well, at that time bands, small bands to come out. And it was exciting because we would have all these games that we played, and the band would play on the entrance to the school. And so we had this beautiful yard. At that time, we had our basketball goals outside also. So we played, on the dirt and stuff like that, and wrapping the maypole and things like that. But at any rate, that was this band, and it had a trombonist in it. And I could appreciate how the drummer played. I could see how he made the sound, and the trumpet players, I could see them pressing valves, and the saxophone players and clarinet, they could press keys. But this guy with this instrument called the trombone, I was saying, how did he know where to stop?
Yeah.
This trombone was intriguing to me, and I was impressed at that time. The rest, again, is history. I went on to pursue that instrument in junior high school.
I always wondered that how people that play the trombone know exactly when to come back in and go back out. That's always been something I just stare at. And one of my sisters plays the instrument, so I'm just like, Tiffany, how do you do that? It's so cool. It's just like practice.
Yeah, it's muscle memory and practice. Of course, you get a proximity of where how the pitch changes based on a certain length. But it's about practice.
It's really good. So when did you come here to Norfolk State?
Wow. Norfolk State for me was 1972, if I'm not mistaken. 72 to 74.
What wasn't your first job out of college?
No. My first job? Oh, Southern University hired me. I was 20 years old. And I was the first full-time assistant director. And as an arranger.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy. And I never had the experience of teaching high school, which in its own right was kind of a deficiency, but I've overcome it to some degree in that I've only taught at the college level. And so you kind of also appreciate when you say it's kind of crazy, I was teaching my peers.
Yeah.
Graduate one semester, and then your friends are in your class.
Was that hard? Did you have to try to say, well, you pull in rank, basically? Did you
Well,
ever have that problem?
No, not really, because I had an opportunity to sit with them after I recognized they were having challenges with discerning between Paul the friend and Paul the teacher. I finally got them together and expressed to them my concern about the respect that I deserved in the role that I played, and that how it impacted the freshmen and underclassmen. So we made a pact, and they would call me Mr. Adams in class and in school. And when we left the campus, it was Paul. But I'm very appreciative to my friends. As a matter of fact, Dr. Sanford and I went to school together, and several of our other friends. And so we had a dynamic relationship and understood respect.
So how many years did you teach at Southern?
Wow. How many years did I teach at Southern? Let's see. 70, no, let me go back to Southern. I started teaching at Southern in 1966. I graduated in 66 in that summer, and I started teaching that summer. So from 66 to 67, March of 67, I think I have that right. Let's go back. 65, yes, 65, and then I left, I'm wrong, at 65, then I left and went to the military in 66, March of 66. Stayed in the military from 66 to 69. And then I had the right to work law as a veteran to come back to my job. And I came back to Southern from 69 to 72. And that's when I came to Norfolk State.
So what made you want to change from Southern to Norfolk? It was just a better opportunity here?
That, and I was a family man. I had 2 children. And my wife and I wanted to explore, and broaden our horizons. And by looking at different opportunities, we were just energetic and ambitious enough to, pursue and investigate. So I came to Norfolk State.
So when you came here, did the band program come enter you with open arms, or was it like, he's a man from Southern?
No, I didn't detect any biases. As a matter of fact, I felt very welcome. Dr. Lyman Brooks hired me. At the time, the chairman was Dr. Georgia Ryder, and she invited me for an interview. And we were excited about coming up, and that's when I met Emery Fears, because I was invited to become the director of bands. And Dr. Ryder and Dr. Reeves, those guys had been pursuing Mr. Jimmy Reeves, who was also a native here, who was a native. And Emery Fears had a phenomenal reputation nationwide, etc. But Emery Fears was working, I think, at Norcom at the time. I think that's correct. And either at Manna or Norcom. I think it may have been Manna. And because Manna was a new school at the time. And he had been being pursued by the university, and he had chosen not to participate. Well, he and Jimmy Reeves were very good friends. And after my interview, Jimmy had a chance to say to Emery, look, Emery, this is your last chance. And we looked at this young guy from Louisiana, and he's going to get the job if you don't take it. But we really want you to do it. Well, I had been offered the job as director. And Emery Fears and Georgia Ryder got with Emery, And when I returned with my wife for my final interview to sign the contract, etc., they had a meeting with me, invited me to a meeting. They meaning Georgia and Emery. And it was in that meeting, in the old library, as a matter of fact, the one that's, they invited me to a meeting in the conference room. At that time, the library, at the top floor of the library was the administration building. That's where the president was, the whole building. And we went in the conference room, and Emery and Georgia were sitting on one side of the table, a long conference table, right in the middle of it. And Georgia announces to me, said, I'd like for you to meet Mr. Fears, Mr. Adams. And I said, well, nice to meet you. Then she broke the news to me. She said, I'd like for you to know that we have decided that we're going to hire Mr. Fears as the director. And we've always wanted him here, and he finally accepted. However, the terms of their contract that we have for you, we're going to honor those terms, but we would like you to be the associate director of band. Well, I said, I'll have to think about it. So I went back to my wife at the hotel, which is now down there. What's the hotel there now? It's the big one. It's not the DoubleTree. It's called a DoubleTree.
Is it the Holiday Inn or the Comfort Inn?
No. The one directly in the mall.
Oh.
Yeah. It was called a DoubleTree. I'm trying to see if it's the Hilton now, but at any rate, I went back to her and we discussed it, and I was not very happy with that. And so O'Neill Sanford was a band director at Virginia State. And I said, let's go hang out with O'Neill and discuss it. So en route there, my wife was telling me that it was an opportunity for me as a young director to work with a guy like Emery Fears. She didn't know him, of course. She just was wise. She just said, you don't have to beat yourself up at this. You have a chance to work with someone who has some experience. It's an opportunity. And they didn't change the money, so we can still make the money. You have less responsibility. So when I got to Petersburg and talked to O'Neill, O'Neill was saying the same thing. He said, man, this is an opportunity, and you can learn from Emery, blah, blah, blah. Well, it still didn't sit well. And I came back to Norfolk, and en route back to Norfolk, I told my wife that I would accept the job as an associate director. We went home, got our children, came back to Norfolk, and I stayed, 72 to 74, I want to say. Yes. And my mother became ill, and my father-in-law was very ill. And I was spending about $500 a month on telephone. My wife was talking every day because her father was very ill. And we decided at the end of the year to go home. And we used, that old adage about giving them flowers while they're alive. And my father-in-law succumbed, but my mother survived. And when we went back, I would go see my mother every week. And that's from Baton Rouge to Shreveport, which is like 200 miles. That would be like going from here to, almost to D.C.
And, nice little drive.
Yeah. Well, actually, I would catch the bus. I would catch the trailway.
Oh, okay.
And go up and help her and spend 3 days, sometimes 4 days, and come back to work, based on whether or not we had a game or whatever in summer. And she owned a farm, and we went up and worked on the farm and did the kinds of things that she liked to do. Then I came back to Baton Rouge, and the next thing happened was I was hired, invited to a job at Howard University. Then I accepted the job as director of band there, and that lasted for 2 years. I can say I was challenged. And I was challenged because I was not politically astute enough to understand the trappings of a job like that. Pretty straight-laced, and I was about the business of getting things done. And part of the challenge was I was making a difference in that program, and there were people who were in higher places were not ready to support that change in the band, from the band to the choir. That's my interpretation of what happened. So they did not renew my contract. They didn't fire me, they just didn't hire me.
A polite way to say it.
Yeah, well, that was part of the deal. As a 2-year contract, they reserve the right to extend the contract or not to renew it. And the thing that I learned in that example was they could afford to not renew it without cause. They didn't have to tell me why, just simply not renew it. So I learned a lesson from that.
So being a professor here, do you enjoy the students that you get every year? Is it like a new challenge musically, or is everyone kind of just in the same range?
Yes, it's a new challenge. I have to say I came back to Norfolk after the Howard situation, and I went into the record business for 8 years, and I taught at Jackson State University. I said all that to say this. After going in the record business, it occurred to me that I'm a teacher, and it's pretty cool. I like doing what I do, and there were some stresses in the record business. We were challenged, but I realized that I'm a teacher, and it's not a bad thing. And I came back to Jackson State, as I said, and then from Jackson State, during that period from 86 to 94 while I was there, my wife contracted breast cancer, and she didn't survive. And in 1996, her demise brought about a change in my attitude in life, and I took off to be certain that I could rear my family. My sons, I have 3 sons, got them situated. Then O'Neill Sanford was director of bands here in Norfolk. He was called to become director. And another sidebar here, O'Neill's mother deceased at the same time my wife did. They were 6 weeks apart, and we lived roughly 20 miles apart. I lived in Baton Rouge. He lived in a town called Slaughter. So we actually saw each other pretty much every day. And he was there assisting with his mother. I was assisting with my wife. And when his mother left, 6 weeks later, my wife left. And so there we were together. And then he got the call to consider coming to Norfolk State. One of his students, Dexter Allgood, was the chairman at the time. And he knew that O'Neill was available. At the same time, it was funny, it was uncanny because some of the alumni were calling me to consider the job. And I had a job at Jackson, so I told O'Neal, you know, I'm not really that interested. But he had already put together a relationship here where he was going to get the job. That's my understanding. And I knew that he needed to go on and he was interested. So I wasn't going to challenge that, again, because I had a job at Jackson. O'Neal came to Norfolk in 98. I went back to my job at Jackson in 98 after a year and a half after my wife's death. And in 2000, he became the interim chair and director of bands. And he asked me to come, you know, and hang out because we had agreed, you know, when we were younger, that we would like to work together. And this was an opportunity for us to come together to retire. And I accepted the invitation. At this time, I had remarried. And I brought my lovely wife, Maxine, here. She came from Detroit to Mississippi, from Mississippi to Virginia.
Maxine. She's
Yeah.
so nice.
Yeah, so that's how that happened. And I've been doing it ever since, you know. To answer your question again, I love working with students. And yes, they are different from year to year. And that's part of the excitement in being able to adjust. I might add that if I have any challenge at all with the students today is that they don't want to be challenged.
Yeah.
And I bring that to the table, so it creates a little hassle for some people.
Do you feel like that's because of the time we live in, like everything's kind of given to people these days, more on working for it?
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I think it challenges our critical thinking skills because we're given stuff we don't have to think about it. You know, the majority of young people today.
Especially technology. Everything is...
Yeah. And I'm a fan of the pencil and paper and the eraser.
Yeah.
You know, and I share that attitude with a lot of students saying, you know, before the computer and the calculator, you know, you had to understand paper, pencil, and pen. You know,
now you're almost like
it's
you
an
have
eraser.
to be skilled. I remember even when I was in elementary in '96, we were forced to take computer classes because we were the class that my teacher expressed were being, you know, the computer babies. So it was nice if you knew how to write in cursive, but if you didn't know how to type,
Yeah, you're in trouble.
yeah. So
I'm challenged a lot when I talk about this, the digital age. I'm always asking the students, I say, what's going to happen when the electricity goes off? Can you add?
The
Can you
whole
subtract?
world.
You know, can you do these kinds of things? You know, but of course, I understand.
Yeah.
And I'm a computer guy. I'm a computer geek, if you will.
yeah. So being at Norfolk State the time you've been, have you the relationships you've built with the directors, has it gotten a lot stronger, or do you feel like everybody kind of gone their own ways?
Oh yeah, it's gotten stronger. The thing that I do enjoy is when I watch the young directors and watch their growth, you know, and I encourage that kind of, if you will, call it going your own way, but understand the bond that got you here and put it together. So I'm excited about it. Just when I think about Mr. Bethea, I met him as a youngster coming out of graduate school as a percussionist. He was hired at Jackson State on the faculty with me. He became the percussion teacher. And I remember how green he was there, and to look at his growth now. Miss Sanders, for example. Miss Sanders was a student of mine. She's a woodwind specialist. I'm a brass specialist, but she was a student in the band, let me put it like that, and studied a few courses with me. And so I claim her, and to watch her develop like this. Mr. Zachary is a Southern University graduate. I didn't have the pleasure of teaching him at the time, but he too has grown dramatically and tremendous in his environment. And thanks to Dr. Sanford for having a vision to bring a team like us together, people who wanted, you know, to give their all to make it, you know, great for the students we encounter at this university.
So do you think that you will be here another year, another few years, or you plan a retirement soon?
Well, I had planned to retire in 3 years. And right now, with the readjustment and restructuring, I'm not sure what's going to happen. And I'm not uncomfortable with it. It's just that I'm not sure. I have my health and my strength. And as long as I have that and I can be around beautiful students like yourself,
You're
I
still
feel
young and kicking.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm motivated to go on because I think there's room for me to continue to give back. And being a student and a proponent, if you will, of the civil rights era where I managed to witness a lot of things, I have dynamic reason to want to give back because I was challenged as a student to not do as much as I could have because of where I'm from. And there were some biases, if you will, in my hometown that I needed to address via my awareness, if you will. And my grandmother worked as a domestic worker, and my mother too. So I always felt challenged that if I had done some things that would have put me in the limelight at the time, it could have caused some challenges back home in Bossier, and they could have been denied employment. So I was very quiet, and now that I'm where I am, it's a result of understanding what all that meant to me and why I really want to stay focused and give back to our students today.
Well, thank you so much for this interview. I really appreciate it, and I've learned so much about you. Even though I've known you going on 4 years now, I always learn something new. Thank you so much.
For, hope this helps you with the class project.
It does. Thank you.
Okay, baby.